Thank you, Madam Deputy President. I rise briefly to speak on this motion, and it doesn't warrant that. It warrants a much bigger contribution, actually. And so I apologise to the member for Hobart for the brevity that my contribution will have.
There'll be other opportunities.
I appreciate the comprehensive contribution from the member for Hobart. The topic of this motion is something that I think all of us should be deeply invested in and should be having a view on and bringing to this place an awareness of in relation to most of the tasks that we do here, whether it's legislative, whether it's our scrutiny roles, whether it's much of the work we do through committees. As the member for Hobart quite rightly pointed out in her contribution, the effect of climate change, the need for climate action, is not confined to one single area of policy or one portfolio area. It stretches into every single facet of our lives. And so when we talk about an urgency for action, we are talking about something that applies to not just to the government of the day, but to each and every one of us in our roles in this place and every facet of those roles, and in our roles as members of the community as well. And I suspect, certainly I feel this myself, that there's a certain overwhelmedness that comes with that.
Absolutely.
And I think that can become difficult then in terms of really engaging in a practical, pragmatic way with how to incorporate consideration of this into all those different aspects of what we do here and also in our lives as community members. So I understand that not all members and not at all times are we ready to get up and speak on this or give voice to our views on it or what we see, what we prioritise in relation to it. However, I hope that it becomes something that we can do more readily and feel equipped to do more readily. I think it can be really easy, particularly in this state, in a funny way in our political environment, to say climate change or climate action, oh, that's something to do with the Greens. And I really appreciate that the member for Hobart, the Greens member in this place, brought this motion. But to some extent, I also feel like I hope that hasn't contributed to the idea that people might not want to speak to this motion or support this motion or align with the sentiments in this motion because of the way things can become politically siloed into being owned by some and not others, or people being receptive to certain things because they're seen as aligned with some and not others. Certainly as an independent in this place, I'm receptive to and hopeful to speak on motions relating to this topic. I hope that come from all sides of this chamber and all members of this chamber, which is not to take away from the Greens member for Hobart bringing this motion, but to hope that actually this is an issue that is seen and embraced and occupied by all of us. I feel very concerned for our state in relation to what we know are already being experienced as impacts relating to climate change and climate challenges. I certainly think our risks are high. Much of the electorate that I represent also is significant in terms of particularly bushfire risk, and I know many members here will have other sorts, either bushfire risks or flooding risks or coastal erosion risks and all sorts of things in their particular electorates that they will be mindful of too, and will likely turn their minds to in relation to this. I also think we are not in any way living up to our responsibilities with our current Act. I'm pleased it's being reviewed. I hope that results in more tangible and accountable requirements on the government and on all of us here to meet post-review. We aren't cutting emissions. We just simply aren't. We're sitting back and relying basically on our forests to provide us with a net zero scenario. And it's a false complacency that lulls us into then, because we simply must cut emissions. And so far there's no evidence that this government has an inclination or the ability to accept that that's what needs to be done. And that's unfortunate. And I'm quite happy to stand here and agree that actually a really important way that we can continue to move forward here is to end native forest logging and to protect our carbon sinks in that way. I agree. That is the inevitable direction that we are taking as a country. That is an inevitable direction for our state. There's all sorts of conversations we should have constructively and productively around that. It shouldn't necessarily be a point of contention, it should be a point of collaboration in terms of seeing that outcome achieved. I thank the member for Hobart for the motion. I wouldn't necessarily have written all the points in the same way that they're written here, but I think they're all important ones to discuss and to recognise. I particularly note that Point 8 of the motion calls on the Tasmanian Government to work with scientists, the community, farmers, business and industry leaders and the Parliament to ensure the Act is strengthened to reflect the urgency of the times. 100% agree with that. That could not be a more inclusive and positive and collaborative proposition for us to consider in terms of a call on the government of the day. I cannot see any reason the government would not embrace that call. It would be quite extraordinary, quite frankly, if it didn't. And I do agree in terms of point 9, it invites us to agree that this demonstration of leadership will give more young Tasmanians hope for a safe climate future. And it's a conversation I've had with young people in different contexts at different times, both in my personal capacity and also in my professional capacity as a member for Nelson. And I think this is something for us to be mindful of, hope for young Tasmanians. I know the government is quite happy to trot that out as an imperative when speaking on other issues like infrastructure proposals, but I think there's something incredibly fundamental about the need to have us as leaders of our state here in this Parliament and within the government, from the government, for us to demonstrate leadership in terms of climate action, effective climate action, to show young people that we are mindful of the prospects for their future and that they can have hope that we will hand over something where we've done the best we can and taken the greatest efforts we could to mitigate for that future. I don't think that's what we can claim or point to doing at this present time. So I think young Tasmanians definitely deserve a greater response from us in order to deliver the opportunity for more hope from them on the climate front. And so I support that sentiment in the motion, most certainly. So somewhat scrappy, brief contribution, member for Hobart, but at this end of our sitting day, I know we're tired, but this is a topic that is important. It is comprehensively interwoven into every aspect of what we do here. And I hope we might all think about ways we can bring our consideration of issues relating to climate action to any piece of work we're doing here, and not just rely on some members of this place or some members of our Parliament more broadly, or the government indeed, to be the ones always to be acting. We can all act on this. I support the motion.